So moving on from the paperwork, we shall go to the GDPR breach, in which the records were released in error, and this has been acknowledged.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was upset, quite annoyed that, you know, we'd gone through the process, and I thought that you know, we'd come to agreement between us, and also that I'd come to agreement with the practice internally, administratively, that we, you know, I'd see your daughter, we'd talk about this decision to release the records and deregister, but then we somehow got that lost in translation. I think the fact that I'd said, you know, your youngest daughter would release the records without that conversation has not quite joined up and to say that doesn't apply to your elder daughter, so that's where that confusion came, and then obviously you got those records in error.
Perhaps there will be a review of your complaints procedure going forward as a result of this conversation.
Perhaps we have reviewed our complaint. We've put in the patient experience team that handle complaints, and they've been in for a couple of years, something like that, managing that complaints, and you know, we feel we've got a really good complaints procedure policies in place.
So you don't think that this process that I've just outlined to you is something that you want to look at to review going forward?
I think absolutely the data breach bits and
just the complaints procedure I'm talking about now, as in the conversation that I'm having with you now.
Yeah.
As opposed to another member of staff who's not involved in the complaint.
Well, I think, like I say, usually we have the person who is involved in the complaint deal with that.
As a patient who's telling you that that isn't acceptable, what do you think you could review that possibly in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we like I say, we don't have hard and fast rules around any of these things because they are often quite grave. But if a person, a patient makes a complaint, we would immediately direct that to the person that they're complaining about. If the patient doesn't want to speak to that person about it and doesn't want direct input from that person, we would offer an alternative.
Is it on the patient?
If there was a suitable alternative.
Is it on the patient to express that? It's not just a given that was probably quite likely that if the patient has a problem with a member of staff, it's quite obvious that they probably wouldn't want to tell them about their problem that they have with them. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that's not obvious, and that's quite often the reverse is true. So usually when people make a complaint about a member of staff, is they've had a concern about that member of staff and don't want it to happen to somebody else. So they absolutely want that person to know that they've either made an error in their view, or they've done something in a way that so there's no learning if that person's not involved. There's no. So yeah, we would always have the person who is complained about involved in some way.
Okay, right. And then I was not legally obliged to reveal the reason why I wanted my daughter's records. That's what I understand, what you've said there.
There's nothing in the data protection legislation that says you have to reveal why you want the records. But what I was trying to get across, like in some circumstances, a practice might query because there might be doubts about, you know,
I understand that. I'm just really trying to get down to I'm not legally obliged to reveal that information, and that's correct, isn't it? That's all.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
Just what the practice needs to do is establish that the applicant has a right of access.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. So I did explain why I wanted the records, and I explained that we'd lost trust in the NHS and their ability to act in the best interests of patients as a result of the COVID rollout.
I'm sorry that the call's really breaking up. I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Yeah, I'll repeat it. I explained on the telephone conversation that we had lost trust in the NHS and their ability to act in the best interests of patients as a result of the COVID rollout and informed consent. We would be moving our medical care to a private practitioner with a view to deleting our records from the NHS database as per our rights under GDPR, right to erasure. So that was really the reason, because we've lost faith and trust in the NHS, which evidently has been proven to be quite wise. Again, going forward, I think that information needs to be expressed in your paperwork, in your policies, that actually not all children are comfortable meeting people that they don't know to prove that they're competent, especially when the organisation themselves are incompetent.
I see. Yeah. Well, this is, like I said, this is a very specific set of circumstances. You know, I guess we could reflect in the SARS paperwork, particularly a bit more around parent and child access requests and how we would how they might be dealt with in a bit more of a clearer way than the paperwork suggests. But like I say, it's not often that it happens. So, this case highlights something that isn't widely encountered.
Okay. So finally, I think no, I've got some more there. So the policy for children who reject your offer of being judged competent, how is this information shared with the child and their parents? So that's basically what we've just said there, that there's room for improvement.
Right.
I have contacted my local MP and have been advised to report this to both the ICO and the CQC. Ultimately, I am seeking a resolution. I don't want other children and their parents subjected to this experience that we've gone through. My original concerns about the ability of the NHS to act in the best interests of patients have been proven well-founded, and ultimately I want to know the measures that you are taking to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, true. And I would definitely steer away from making a policy or procedure on that, because what we then do is narrow that down, whereas this is a very unusual, novel situation, and it would have to be taken case by case.
That's one way of looking at it, but with safeguarding and having up-to-date, transparent policies, you would have to have that written within your policies so that parents and children know what their rights are. So
I mean, they could go to the law to find out their rights.
But whether
in terms of what our policies internally are for this type of request, we're at liberty to handle them in the way that we see fit.
Going back to your forms, that would be the place where you put that transparent information so that children can understand what their rights are.
Yeah, we could certainly add in there, couldn't we, that if you know, if you're a child and you're 13 years old or above, we might ask to see you to talk about this request. Is that the type of thing?
That's the sort of thing.
Yeah.
But also you are not obliged to accept that offer.
Yeah.
Because it's suggesting that there is no alternative.
Right.
Can I just?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would be worried why that was the case.
But on a case-by-case basis, would you accept that a teenage girl might not want to go through that process, might find it excruciatingly embarrassing and unnecessary? She just wants her data. She doesn't want treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on the circumstances. If there were several different ways of, you know, offering that, and they're all rejected,
yes,
I would be worried about that.
Why but again, you can be worried about it, but it's not your business.
It is my business because I'm the data controller of those records. So if I release those records and somebody comes to harm because I've released them, that is my business.
If a child does not want to go through the process of proving their competency, then it is like my 12-year-old daughter had no problem getting her data because she's 12. but because my 14-year-old daughter has now triggered some sort of system of safeguarding, I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's not. It's treating people as individuals that develop
It's not,
competency and capacity over
it's not
time.
treating people as individuals, it's treating people based on their age. So you've made that decision purely on age. It's got nothing to do with the personality or the individual or their set of circumstances.
No, we haven't got to that stage yet, have we? So the age, absolutely right, triggered a feeling of, right, more information needed here. Let's talk to the data subject to see if they consent to this release of their data. And you're right, age was one thing in there. The next stage is going to be, what's that person's capacity?
Okay, but yeah, so ultimately it was a decision not based on the individual, it was based on age. That's correct, isn't it?
No. So the initial, so the decision whether to release the records or not has several filters or several stages. So there wasn't one thing that would say yes or no. The first thing was, yeah, surrogate marker, age for competency. You know, we've not got this generally accepted age of 13. You know, if it was 13 and a really complex decision, I'd say, well, still a 13-year-old can't make that decision. We'll defer to the parental responsibility. You know, this is quite an easy to understand concept for me. So I thought 14-year-old, now 15, would be able to have that conversation. I'd understand, both be reassured, records release.
Just going back to the decision was based on age. It was based on age, purely on age at that initial point, wasn't it?
So the first filter was, what are the age of the subject?
Yeah. So because that's why my 12-year-old we could get her information, but you would not release the 14-year-old's information.
Yeah.
So that's not based on an individual set of circumstances. That's purely been triggered. The whole thing was triggered by her age.
Well, like I said, the initial. Yeah.
But no, you can call it the initial bit, but it was triggered by age, wasn't it? The initial decision to make this more difficult for us to obtain her records was purely based on age.
Yeah.
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 Thank
Yeah.
you.
Initial. Yeah.
Okay.
And I can't, and you know, like I said, I can't envisage ever writing a protocol or procedure for that. I'll only ever want that to be based on individual clinician assessment of that situation.
So are you going to write a policy or a procedure for what you do if a child refuses to be assessed for guilt competency?
No.
You're not going to do that?
No.
You're going to continue with this situation?
Yeah.
Do you think it's worked well?
I think that's a rhetorical question. Well, obviously for you it's not worked well. For me, obviously it's not worked well at all.
But you're not going to do anything differently?
Well, absolutely we'll do something differently. It just means I won't write a policy for it, because I don't think this is the type of thing that we want written in a policy, because I think it will narrow the scope too much. This should be clinician-led, senior clinician-led.
Do you think that parents and patients, children, should be transparently informed of their rights on this paperwork?
I mean, I think the paperwork, if we're going to have paperwork, needs to be clearer for this circumstance, and we'll certainly update that. In terms of rights, I think when you say that, you're talking about legal rights. So you know, that's not our place to advise on the law. So you know, that is freely available information. We have our privacy notice, which describes how we use data, and that's freely available.
But obviously, a child, you know, if you're expecting a child to fill in this paperwork, you have.
We're not expecting children to fill in that paperwork.
You're not expecting, but they're well within their rights to obtain their own medical records.
Yeah.
This isn't for children.
Yeah. Well.
Do you have a form for children?
As in, we're not expecting it. As in, it's not something we come across often. We wouldn't often, or if ever, have a child making a subject access request.
Is that something that you might look at in the future?
Yeah, which is why I said about, you know, we can update that form to include these circumstances. If you are a child we may ask for more information or to see you about this request.